knew that was horrible. I know kids. I actually know there's a kid in my town named Curtis and a kid named Craig, and they always hang out together. So.
Yeah, definitely.
What is it, Pete?
You from Tucson?
California, but I moved there. Tucson.
Oh, whereabouts in California are you from?
San Bernardino.
Uh-huh.
Curtis is Ethan's friend from high school, right?
Yeah.
Oh. So when did you move here?
When I was 15.
Oh.
22 now.
Oh. You're a student? Or
No, I'm just working at the school district out here.
you're a student of life.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Well, we're all students. There's an expression, if you approach things with a beginner's mind, you'll learn a lot more. If you already think you know something, then I don't know if you could say subconsciously, but your attention won't be very open, or you won't be very focused. If you think, I've heard this before. I'm just here because we're supposed to, or whatever. It's a good idea. It's a nice social gathering or whatever, but I already know everything. So Sunday, we're celebrating the appearance day of Lord Ramachandra, although the actual day is Tuesday, but we're going to be taking advantage of the weekend. And thought I'd mention a little bit about, and because this year is unfortunately an election year, we're under the deluge of political stuff, but because Lord Ram appeared as, is there a reverb on this? Lord Ram appeared as an ideal king, leader, and again, because it's this presidential election year or whatever, besides the president, other election. But so I thought we could use it as sort of a springboard to talk about, being a leader. Do we want a leader? Do we aspire to be a leader? Just something along those lines of leader. So if not, maybe we could just have more of a discussion. Like maybe you could share some thoughts of, what inspires you in a leader, just to get our brains operating on the same wavelength. Anyone want to qualities of a leader that you would admire, that would inspire you?
I'm being a hypocrite.
Okay.
Intelligence. I'm willing to pitch in with whatever it is that they're asking the lower people to do.
Okay.
Humility.
Yeah.
They should know where they're going.
Yeah. If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. That's a song that George Harrison wrote.
They care about the people they lead.
Just before so vision. They should know they should have a vision, right? Where they're going. So that's something that I'm glad you brought it up, because if we don't understand, basically what the world is all about, the purpose of the world, then how are you going to find a leader? Like, in one sense, God is the only leader, the supreme controller, the supreme enjoyer, the supreme proprietor. But in this world, which is considered to be like a reflection, sometimes it's called a distorted reflection. And the example is given of the reflection of a tree, like on the bank of a river or a lake. The tree is reflected, but it's upside down. So this world sometimes is described to be a reflection of the real world, the spiritual realm. So we have leaders here, but there's some corruption historically. I mean, nowadays we have, the world is more moving in this direction of democracy, whereas in the past we had kings, monarchies, and queens. And but because of that, the corruption of this age, that system of government was definitely moved away from. But now we have another system where we don't really know who's in charge. We have figureheads, but so. And Kirtaneshwara had mentioned about what did you say? He shouldn't be a hypocrite. So this word integrity, your inside matches your outside. Basically, that's something that, I mean, to me now, when I hear politicians, to me it's almost like they're just well-dressed car salesmen. It's just they're just trying to sell you something. There's some language that they use to sort of using buzzwords to maybe invoke some emotion, but we are inspired by greatness, and Krishna, in one of the descriptions of Krishna in the Vishnu Purana, describes the 6 opulences, general categories of God: all powerful, all beautiful, all famous, all knowledge, all renunciation. Leave something out. 5 or 6. Anyways, we're attracted by greatness. Like we can't, in one sense, you can't deny that we're attracted by opulence or greatness, wealth, the wealth of beauty, the wealth of, say, someone's very talented in some way. We're attracted. So we can't like just shut that off and say, well, there's no like throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing, that there's been exploitive leaders, so better we don't follow anybody. You just throw the whole thing out the door. And that's who was Aesop's fables, the sour grapes philosophy? Was that a fox?
It was jackal.
A jackal? Yeah. So, I mean, I was speaking with Sean a little bit before, children, because of their innocence, they see, the world's a magical place for a child, right? Like I remember one time I was in Reed Park and I was watching some little kids, and they have those big geese and ducks there, and the kids were just fascinated. Like children are just fascinated by animals. You take them to the zoo or something like that, and it's like, wow, it's just, the world's a magical place. And we tend to lose that magic. We get a little jaded as we grow up, and especially if we become exploited by someone, especially someone in a position of authority or leadership. It can really, demystify, or what do you call it? Take the magic away from the world. That the world is an enchanting place. It's an energy of God, and it's very miraculous. And our consciousness can be affected in such a way that we don't see the magic. We just see the kind of the ugly side of things. And that kind of vision, it blocks our ability to appreciate and meditate, think of God when we're in that kind of. So on one hand, it's not surprising. We live in a very kind of cynical age, this postmodernism we talked about, and Mantra Oasis one time, that this historical period is called postmodernism, and it's characterized by a lot of cynicism and a lack of confidence in social institutions that historically have had some respect. You know, now, like when you listen to politicians arguing, it's like children in a, you know, sandbox screaming at one another. It's like, seriously, you people are adults? You know, it's really quite, you know, on the one hand, it's not surprising if we're familiar with some of the teachings of not just the Vedas, the Sanskrit writings of India, but philosophers throughout history have described, you know, actually it was Plato, I believe, he said that democracy leads to tyranny, or mob rule. And then when things get so chaotic, you get a strong man comes in and say, I can fix it. So that's, and then you get an autocratic type of person, a powerful, strong man, because of the chaos that ensues when there's not a qualified leader or leaders. And not just politically, but we're all, in a sense, leaders. Like if you're a parent, you're a leader. If you're a teacher, you're a leader. As we get older, then, you know, younger people are going to look at older people, hopefully, as that they have some wisdom or they have something to share. So we all, and there was this one author named Stephen Covey. He wrote a famous book. I can't remember well, he's wrote a lot of books, but
Seven habits
of six highly successful people. Yeah, and he talks about working within your circle of influence as opposed to your circle of concern. Like your circle of concern, you're worried about the world and what everything's going on, but what can you do individually? But you have a circle of influence, your immediate friends, family, maybe your co-workers, that we are, you know, we do have an important role in society. We may not think of ourselves as like leaders, but especially like children, they're very sensitive, you know, to not just their parents, but any adults. You know, they really subconsciously, they really imbibe a lot. You don't even have to talk to a kid sometimes, but it's just your behavior, your habits. A child will imbibe that subconsciously. So, so we do have influence that we may not be aware of. And we do have, just like now in the room here, you know, your individual consciousness, you know, there's 20 of us in here, something like 15, 20 people. You know, we're all contributing to a certain energy in the room, you know, depending on our consciousness. And so like you are bringing something to this gathering, and you may not have like thought about so much consciously, but there's as we say, a vibe created when people are seriously or sincerely trying to move forward in life, to grow, especially spiritually. You have a certain consciousness, you know, an openness. You serve as a conduit we serve as a conduit for one another. And in Sanskrit, this is called Sankirtan, a congregational gathering where there's glorification of God, is especially described as being the most, it's like a portal opens to that higher spiritual dimension when people come together congregationally and hear and chant, discuss about God and improving ourselves spiritually in this world. It opens up. There's a unity in our consciousness because God is within everyone's heart. And when we're all kind of on the same page spiritually, that we're searching for God within ourselves and in the world around us, it creates a very favorable environment, and society can be changed. Like it seems sort of overwhelming, especially if you pay attention to the news, which I don't recommend. because it just seems like it's all grief and bad and shootings and wars and death and destruction, and you can really, be because that's what grabs our attention. The chaos. It's you're not there's not going to be a breaking news. Teenager helps elderly person across the street. Stay tuned for the details. It's like, no, teenager, hits old guy over the head with a brick. It's like, oh my God, everybody's shocked and everything. So, craziness or chaos tends to grab our attention more, but and they know that there's an old expression with newspapers: if it bleeds, it leads. The lead story, some chaos. So we have to, if we're mindful, what we're digesting, just like you digest unhealthy food, then you're going to get sick. So we're digesting unhealthy sound vibration, negative sound vibration. It can, we can become sick emotionally, psychologically. And then that affects our ability to tune in to this sort of magic of spiritual sound vibration, which is really the foundation of especially bhakti yoga. It begins with hearing, shravanam, kirtanam, Vishnu smaranam, and then hearing and chanting or describing. They're two sides of the same coin. You can't hear something if somebody hasn't chanted it or recorded it or spoke it. Where this hearing and chanting is, in one sense, they're synonymous. You don't have one without the other. Sometimes people, what's the most important aspect of devotional service? Is it hearing or is it chanting? Well, it's both. It's the same. It's one and different. So. So I'm rambling on a bit here. Let's go back to, we talked about some of the qualities that we look for in a leader. Someone said humility. And, that's a big one because, there's a lot of leadership sort of seminars and corporate. There's a lot of, I don't know if you call it seminars, but, and there's this expression, be a servant leader, and I was thinking about in terms of, to become a good leader, first you become a good follower. And in one sense, a good leader doesn't think of themselves as a leader per se. They think that I'm simply a servant of another leader and I'm acting on their behalf. That's my service to, you could say, my mentor. Here's a fun fact for all you literature buffs. The word mentor is the name of an advisor to, how do you say his name? Telemachus in the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey. Odysseus is some famous king, and his son was Telemachus, and his advisor in his youth was named Mentor. So that's where we get the name Mentor from. So to have mentors, this is not unique to our presentation of spiritual life. It's sort of a no-brainer in the sense that if you want to become good at anything, find somebody who's good at it and become like an apprentice. Find a mentor. And with the mood, ultimately, so that you can become a mentor, that there's this, just like we have Lord Chaitanya, he's reaching up and he's reaching back. So we're always reaching up. We want to take shelter of superior personalities, and then we also want to be shelter for others, be guides for others. But if, in terms of being a hypocrite, like if we're not good followers of someone, then we can't really function as a leader. That would be hypocrisy. That, I'm independent. Like, I don't need anybody to be mentored under. I'm so whatever, intelligent or together that, I'm going to start my own thing, start my own movement or whatever. But where the Vedic tradition is, is this principle of parampara, disciplic succession, that there's always someone higher. And ultimately it goes back to God, that God, Ishvara, what's the word, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a verse that says, that Krishna is the only controller. What is that? Ekala Ishvara Krishna Arasabha Nritya. Yeah, Krishna is the only real leader. God is the only real leader. And I was talking with my friend Alan today. It's like, if you go somewhere, I was traveling cross country, so my family lives in Minnesota, so every once in a while, back when I had a little more energy, I would take cross country trips, driving to visit. And sometimes I would stop, at these famous whatever tourism places like the Grand Canyon or mountains in Colorado, whatever. And there was some appreciation, but when you're with someone else, the enjoyment is sort of increased. It's like, oh, isn't this beautiful? Like, our enjoyment is enhanced in the association of others. So where does that come from? Because God is not an enjoying in a vacuum. God is expanding into other living entities for this whole reciprocation of love and enjoyment that comes. That's special, that you don't have in, you could say, solitude. I mean, we all may need some solitude, but so that we can go back and enrich our lives with relationships. Sometimes we need to retreat a little bit and have a little one, personal time. But with the idea that there's a famous, I don't know if it was a poem. I think it was a poem. John, what was his name? Donne or something. No man is an island. He was some statesman or maybe a religious figure back in the 1400s, 1500s or something. He wrote a famous poem that has a stanza which says, "No man is an island." That we don't function naturally in a vacuum. That we are social beings, and God is a social being. He's the supreme social being. He wants to engage in relationships. In Sanskrit, the word is rasa. And that's where the real enjoyment in life comes, in relationships. I'm getting a little off from the idea of leadership and becoming a leader, but that's real leadership is, as they say, you don't demand respect, you command respect. And somebody said something about, actually having a sense of caring for those who are under you, right? Was that you said that, Lilita?
Oh, willing to do whatever you.
I was
Yeah, he said caring, and I said
Okay.
willing to do whatever you.
Okay. And we can expand that, when we say, are people really under us? If you're a leadership position, or you're aspiring to be a leader, and you think people are under you, then you're going to have a tough time. The idea in spiritual life is that we are trying to be, because the idea of mercy is like water. Water flows from above, and gravity goes down. So mercy comes to those who are humble, and being in a position of leadership means you have an opportunity to serve many. It's not that we're really over others, it's that you're playing a role of guidance, but sometimes people say with their dogs or something, you know, who rescued who, you know? So sometimes, you know, taking a position of responsibility, leadership can actually be an important part of growing in humility, because if you don't become humble, then, as you said, who wants to follow you? If you're arrogant, if you think you're better than others, people are very sensitive. And, you know, you pick up on the consciousness of someone, and sort of regardless of what words they're saying, the sound vibration emanating from anybody is simply carrying their consciousness. And they may speak eloquent philosophy or even quote scriptures or whatever, you know, but if their consciousness is like, I'm better than you, that's what you're getting. You're not getting Bhagavad Gita. Somebody's quoting Bhagavad Gita verses thinking, I'm so intelligent, I know so many verses. You will feel this arrogant fool, you know. They think they're so intelligent, but, you know, that's Arjuna was chastised by Krishna in the very beginning. He was giving all these arguments on the basis of religion, and a little comical, isn't it? You're going to argue with God about religion, you know? Arjuna's arguing with Krishna. This would be irreligious to engage in this battle, you know? But he hadn't understood that, you know, it was a Leela. Arjuna was in this yoga maya, this illusion, but he hadn't really understood that Krishna was God. It wasn't until later in like the 10th chapter when Arjuna has this aha moment. You are the supreme Brahman, Param Brahma, Param Dhamma. You are the supreme Lord. So, humility. Lord Chaitanya's, you know, emphasizes that. And humility, one definition of humility is just honesty, like be real. We're very small. You know, sometimes people, they go off into these astronauts or pilots, they go off and they look at the Earth relative to the, it's just very tiny, you know, and some of these astronauts, you know, they say, you know, really change their perspective, you know, that we are so tiny, this Earth is such a tiny place relative to the rest of the cosmos. And, you know, but we're thinking, you know, I'm so intelligent, you know, I can figure things out, you know, and the material world is a very unique way of whammies on you. And as soon as you think you got it all together, whoosh, the rug gets pulled out. You know, we become humbled by the material energy in that we're not controllers. And that's part of being humble, means like, we have this expression, you know, someone's a control freak. There's some insecurity. And sometimes it's due to abuse, actually, that someone develops that, you know, because you were taken advantage of when you were in a vulnerable position. So you want to keep things always, you know, sort of under control. You don't want to be taken advantage of. So sometimes it's a result of abuse. So I'm not dissing on people who are control freaks. It's just, there's a sense of helplessness, you know, that we're trying to alleviate. But sooner or later, everything is going to be taken away. Like, we can't control, you know, the body. Our body is aging. And I was talking to Alan earlier today, my friend. He's 72 tomorrow. His birthday's tomorrow. His mother's 98, and his father was always complaining about, you know, now this is going wrong. Now this is happening in the body. I'll be 65 this year, and I can what do you call it? Speak with some authority on the fact that the body does fall apart, folks. No matter how healthy you are right now, you will. And Prabhupada used to speak to these young devotees talking about the miseries of birth, death, old age, and disease. And the devotees are like, yeah, that sounds interesting. You know, yeah. But until we actually start to experience it, it doesn't become, it's not as convincing. It's not as convincing. But when you wake up, every morning and, something else is aching or something, this is going wrong, that's going wrong, or just the lines on my face. Oh my God. As I look in the mirror, it's just like, ugh, I'm becoming one of those crinkly old guys. And it's really, the time is just flown, like when you're young, time moves so slow. I remember when I was a little kid and I couldn't reach the cupboards to get the cereal. It's like, dang it, I wish I was bigger, and it seemed like it took so long to grow. But then you get to a certain point where, the time is just flying. And, one day you wake up and it's like, wow, I'm an old guy. And it's like, it's kind of freaky. Just got to jerry rig it. Sorry, folks. Anyway, let's get some more thoughts from you folks so it doesn't become a monologue here. Anything that comes to your mind about leaders or becoming a leader, because we need inspiration, like this word inspire. It actually means like breath. What was it? Like in respiratory, there's some word, I like etymology, I like looking up words and stuff, but the, like whatever it is, the Greek or Latin or this or that, I think it actually means like respirator, inspire. You can see the relationship, inspire, respirate, like to breathe, like to, we need life. What was the one that I said that you quoted about, means God, enthuse? Yeah, in God, in theos. Yeah, theo is God. So enthusiasm, inspiration, similar thing. So, yeah, looking for mentors, becoming a mentor, anything about that jumps out in your mind?
Something I said humility a minute ago, but one thing that's been in my mind a lot is how people will easily fall for a narcissistic kind of personality. And you were talking about people who control freaks, and they can dress so nice and look so pretty and sound so eloquent, and everybody will just go, oh, and then they'll all follow this person, but he's really not a very nice person. You know what I mean? I mean, they'll be like a narcissistic, using the people just to promote himself. You see, and that is something that I think this country has done a lot. We follow people who don't deserve to follow. And that's what worries me a lot.
It was something I looked up, this whole phenomenon of influencers now.
Yeah.
And that word, again, in a little etymology, influence. So the word, whatever comes from Latin or this or that, but like fluid, fluid flows into flow. Like if you're going to influence, like say you're going to direct the water, the flow of water, so an influencer, someone who's directing, the flow of, people's attention or their pocketbooks or whatever. So this whole phenomenon of influencers has been, you could say, really magnified by the internet, where people who may not normally have been very important in society suddenly become big influential people. Followers, how many followers do you have on whatever it is, Facebook or YouTube or this or that? And it's funny because Lord Chaitanya says, Nadanam, Najanam, like this is one of the one of the stumbling blocks in spiritual life is, this prestige or respect of having followers. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, Prabhupada's guru, he very starkly warns against the danger of this desire for pratishtha or adoration, distinction that can it can infiltrate our consciousness, or let's put it this way, it's already there. It's already there because we're trying to be someone we're not, in terms of we're trying to be God in this world. We may not advertise ourselves as God, but we want to be an enjoyer independently of God. That's why we're here. So this tendency to want to be the center, to have followers, that's kind of built into all of us. And the whole process of spiritual life is actually to purify that I'm actually a follower. I'm not a leader, I'm a follower. I'm a servant of the servant of the servant of God. And my service may be to be in a position of leadership relatively in this world, but it's not my eternal identity. It's a conditional. It's work in this world, and we have we run on two tracks. We have Sanatana Dharma, and then we have this conditional Dharma based on our psychophysical nature. We have roles to play in society relative to our mind and body. You could say in a fundamental level, we're all eternal souls. We're all servants of God. But on a functional level, we have different roles. And some people have the role of being, organizers, leaders. Or some people have the role of being intellectuals. Some people have the role of mercantile or business, trade, and others are supporting those other types of folks, laborers, workers. So we all have a conditional dharma or nature, and it may be of one of being a leader, but it's not our fundamental nature. Fundamentally, we're all servants of God, but that service, that servant leader role, it can become a misdirected goal, especially in an institution, religious organizations and institutions. And the funny thing is too, is this is actually a new phenomenon, the fact that we have organized religion. In previous ages, the whole society was religious. It wasn't like there was a separate, we have a secular state, like the government is, not supposed to advocate one particular religion. That's fine, but that doesn't mean you push God out of society. Some people, they misunderstand that separation of church and state means there's no state church, but you don't try to obliviate God from society. So this idea of organized religion it's kind of a more modern phenomena, relative, like, say, going back to the beginning of Christianity and so on. Previously, societies they were God conscious. Society was God conscious. So you had leaders who were God conscious, and they were acting in that position as representatives of God to help facilitate the organization of human society so that everyone could be uplifted in their spiritual life and get out of this conditional existence to return to our original spiritual home. So, anyways, you're going to say something?
I just want to say two things. One of them is, I think, that about the spire thing, because expire means to die. Inspire would be, to be filled with life.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is you really eloquently put that, being a leader, especially in a spiritual role, is that you end up being a leader just by being a servant to your leader. That's such a powerful realization, because if you just act in the capacity of a servant, your leader and like your leadership is just all in service to the guru, then you find that it really works. It really gives you the proper consciousness. And you see that in, anybody who's a leader and moving who's actually, living it. It's like they're mostly just dedicated to their guru. And it really, that's more inspiring than any type of, authoritarian leadership or something like that. It's much more inspiring to see that this person is so determined. I mean, like Srila Prabhupada, for example, that he was so determined to serve his guru that, Mukunda Maharaj and the devotees, just felt inspired to help him. Of course, then surrender takes place. It's a different story, but I found that with like different devotees in my life, and I just felt inspired to help them by seeing how they were determined to serve the guru, whether they had help or not. That was a nice point. Thank you.
And you had another point? Oh, well, the first one was about inspire, expire. The Ganga.
I had a point, because you were talking about humility and leadership. And I remember watching a video once on parenting, because the role of a parent is, I guess you could say, sort of a leader. And they were saying that studies were showing the parents that have the healthiest relationships with their children are the parents that can go to their children and admit when they were wrong about something. Whether it was like, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have yelled at you, that was not appropriate for me to say, or I'm sorry that I misjudged the situation and I grounded you for this, whatever it may be, instead of just not saying that they were wrong with the situation. It showed that the children actually grew up to respect their parents more and go to them for advice and felt safer. It goes along with being humble, in the position of leadership.
And that's actually like strength, to be able to admit when you make a mistake, to falsely present oneself as, whatever, infallible, does not engender respect. And, people are not that dumb. I mean, you can fool some of the people some of the time, all the people, whatever, you can't fool everybody all the time. People are, if we respect people's intelligence, we don't have all the answers. I mean, we say we have all the answers because we say, this Krishna has revealed the teachings and that, but we haven't realized them all. And just by parroting the scriptures doesn't mean we have all the answers, because it's not just the words, it's our consciousness. That's what's, in terms of how Prabhupada influenced people. It was his consciousness. Okay, the words are expressing certain ideas, and we try to speak intelligently and reasonably and rationally. But people don't, there's an expression, people don't care how much you know, they want to know how much you care. People can feel that when it's love, when you actually, Alan was saying, his I can't remember who, it was his mother used to cook soup for him or something, and his wife used to cook soup, and sometimes I make some khichdi and I'll give him a little take home. And he said, that's love. That's love. And Prabhupada specifically presented bhakti not just as devotion, but as devotional service. There's a practical manifestation of our love in that you're doing things for others. You're in service to others. And the Sanskrit word is seva. It means, serving with no expectation of return. It's not like this capitalistic society that we live in. It's like, okay, what's in it for me? The service itself is what's in it for us. It's that is who we are by nature. We're servants of God, servants of one another, because everyone is part and parcel of God. And when we act as servant, the reward is you're happy, because that's who you are. By nature, you're full of pleasure, full of knowledge, eternal. And by acting in the position, our constitutional position, as in service to others, then we'll be satisfied. And that's, like, you could say, the greatest wealth is just to be satisfied. You could be a billionaire and buy everything you want and have a nice house and whatever, and you could be completely unsatisfied. No, I want something more. I want something more. I want something more. Never satisfied. So real wealth is to have satisfaction. Like, I'm peaceful. I'm content. Happiness is there's a difference between pleasure and happiness. Just gratifying our senses and making, having enjoyable experience on the material platform doesn't necessarily make us happy. In fact, it oftentimes does the exact opposite. The more we indulge, especially overindulge in materialistic gratification of the senses and the mind, then you become actually repulsed by this very thing that you were enjoying. You take too much, you eat too much ice cream, and then you end up getting sick. If you become, whatever. We could talk about so many different ways of indulging our mind and senses, and ultimately it becomes repulsive, the very thing that we were enjoying. So that's not happiness. There may be some temporary pleasure to the mind and the senses, but it's not real happiness. And if we're not happy, if we're not peaceful, then, like, what's the point? Yes, Meg. Good to see you.
Yeah, back to her point about being humble, this epidemic of narcissism. I find it ironic that there's so much arrogance, but yet so much low self-esteem too. It's juxtaposition of people thinking they're, God's gift, but they're really, there's really a lot of low self-esteem, which I see is really impairing relationships. And you touched on the whole thing of, how consciousness is really about relationships with each other. And I've just noticed that relationships in general, like in this current age, are fraught with turmoil and, just disruption and conflict. And is that mine? I mean, where's all this coming from?
In one sense, it's if we understand the nature, why we're here in the first place. Is that because we're trying to? Oscar Wilde, I think it was, said, just be yourself. Everyone else is taken. We're trying to be someone we're not. And that goes to this, integrity or authenticity. If we this is, zooming way out, trying to be the center, trying to be the enjoyer. That's the position of God. We're trying to usurp that position. And you got 8 billion now on the planet, not counting all the animals and insects. And, they want their turf too. Like, the dog is like, this is my yard, get out of my yard. Like, all the living entities in the material world are trying to assert that position of dominance, to be a controller, to be an enjoyer, to, so on. And we may dress it up with nice clothing and cars and whatever, this or that, but the mentality is more like that of, get out of my, get out of my country, get out of my country. It's like dogs barking. And so it's not surprising to us if we understand the nature of the consciousness that has brought us here, and that spiritual life is about, a change of heart, changing, a transformation of heart, rather than be the center, be the enjoyer. Not that we shouldn't enjoy, but that enjoyment is coming, as Prabhupada so, vividly or often would say, it's, it's like if the hand is trying to enjoy food by not serving the stomach, it is trying to directly, it doesn't work. The hand has to put the food in the mouth, and then it goes to the stomach, and then the hand is nourished. So we're like, parts and parcels of God, that we're like the hand. And if we're serving the whole, then we'll be happy automatically. There's this phenomenon, like the more you try to be happy, the more unhappy you become. It's the less you think of your own happiness and you think of the happiness of God and subsequently the happiness of others, then you actually will be happy because you're taking yourself out of an artificial position of being in the center when God is in the center. Or God being in the center means other people will also be in the center. Like we're taking ourselves out of the center. And it's so what do you call it? It's so counterintuitive because we're so used to thinking we're in the center. And it's not like you're such a jerk because you think you're the center. We all think we're the center. That's why we're here. And it's the idea of coming together is like, hey, it's like rehab. The material world's like one giant rehab. We've all got issues. We've all been trying to be, we all want to be the center. And now, we're put into this material world. We're getting material bodies. We're going through all these circumstances to give us impetus to take ourselves out of the center because it doesn't work. We just become frustrated. And so we're kind of support, like when you go to AA meetings, hello, my name's, George, I'm an alcoholic, So we all can come in and say, hello, my name's Ganga Mantri. I am a self-centered person. I'm trying to get out of it. That's why I'm taking up this spiritual life. I want to put God in the center. So help me, let's serve one another in trying to put God in the center. And to the extent that we're able to do that, we'll be naturally, we'll be a natural leader because we're following the real leader. We put the real leader in the center, God. And then again, you become a leader when you become a good follower. When you become a loving service to God, you naturally become a leader, no matter what external role you're playing, in this world. But we're all, like I said, the circle of influence that we have. We're all more or less, we are influencers on some level, and the more we work on our circle of influence, according to Stephen Covey, the more we concentrate our energy on the immediate relationships that we have, then naturally your circle of influence will grow. Because when you're not self-centered, people are attracted, your circle of influence will grow. And it may even fill your circle of concern. But oftentimes we're so worried about this great circle of concern, all the problems of the world. It's like, what are you going to do? Work on where you can influence people. And that's your immediate relationships. And, be present for the people who are in your life now, and don't worry about, people on the other side of the world. Worry about the people, and it doesn't mean we can't care. That's a circle of concern. But if you want to really enact change in the world, you have to begin on a more grassroots level, like who are the people who are in your immediate life, and improving the relationships, improving our attitude of service to those people in our immediate circle. And then again, then you will increase your circle of influence to be able to enact change on maybe a more widespread level. But if we're always worried about things outside of our circle of influence, we're just going to be frustrated. And we won't be there for the people who need us, we don't have to be on the cover of whatever. I mean, we used to say be on the cover of Time magazine, but who reads Time magazine anymore? So we don't have to aspire to be someone we're not. Some people just have the karma that they're in these positions of whatever prominence. And and this, I'll end on this, is that there's a real, and this kind of goes to the thing of self-esteem that Meg brought up, narcissism and self-esteem. If we're constantly like comparing ourselves to others, it's not really a good state of emotional thing. It's not really a healthy emotional state or psychological state. If we compare ourselves to ourselves, like who was I 5 years ago? Who was I a year ago? Who was I yesterday? Am I moving forward? Am I becoming, am I growing? I don't want to say better, but are we growing? Like, is our heart opening? Are we more loving? That's real success. And it's not really not important what other people are doing and whatever position they have. And I'm unworthy unless I'm, got 10,000 followers on Facebook or whatever, or I'm making a lot of waves somewhere. Oftentimes, fame and adoration becomes one of the worst, one of the most miserable things. You lose your privacy. You can't imagine if you walked out the door and paparazzi were like taking pictures of you and your kids and your, everywhere you went, people were trying to, clamor for, your autograph or this or that. I mean, it's so many of these celebrities, it's a curse. It's a curse to be popular, but everyone is like hankering for popularity and notoriety and position and influence, but it's be careful what you wish for,
There's something. Kriton was saying, the humble person is always asking for advice from above or advice from other people, or Lavonda says you apologize to your people or to your children. And I'm just thinking about the nature of our society, where if a leader says, oh, let me ask my advisors, the population will immediately say, oh, he can't think for himself or stand on his own 2 feet. We don't want this fellow. Or he's using a teleprompter, or he wrote notes, or he prepared for his speech. So he must be an idiot because he did not. And so our society is kind of warped into thinking that if somebody is asking for advice, then somehow there's some leadership quality or something. You know what I'm trying to say? Our society is doing it, and maybe our leaders are a reflection of who our society is. Because we have this attitude that if anybody has to ask advice, then they're incompetent, they don't really know how to lead. So I think my kind of society is asking for trouble because they're looking for a narcissistic, arrogant leader who doesn't think they have to ask anybody for help. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would.
They're not humble.
The people
They're not
think,
humble.
the voters look at someone who says, wait a minute, I'll get back to you on that, I'll look it up, or they make notes and they ask their advisors before they answer a question. They say, well, he can't think on his feet, he's not independent, and then they get rid of the person who is reaching up for advice. You follow what I'm saying? Does that make sense? We as a society,
we respect know-it-alls.
we respect know-it-alls. I mean, not me, but our society respects somebody who pretends they don't need to ask anybody, they have all the answers, when really they don't. We love fakers.
I mean,
Attracted to somebody who can fake.
I mean, who are the real leaders now? It's mainly entertainers.
Yes.
Like people who can put on a good performance.
Yes.
So, I mean, we have to be, I don't know, we maintain some childlike innocence, but we can't be naive, in spiritual life. But we don't want to fall into like negativity where we're just, we can see the obvious flaws in society, but like lead, follow, or get out of the way, as the old saying goes. If if we want to transform the spiraling downward of society, one thing is just a retreat. It's crazy. I'm just not going to participate. But we are dependent. Unless you're going to go join a self-sufficient farm community somewhere and give up all of our conveniences of modern life. Most people are not able to do that. But it's great if there's an example. It's a great service for someone to do, because it's desperately needed. But Varsana Swami, a very saintly person from farm, he grew up on a farm, and he's lived on rural communities his whole life. And his observation was that somebody who grows up in the city, it's very difficult for them to live, very simply in the country. I mean, it's not impossible. There are people who do it, but at least somehow or other, like, try to minimize, simplify, and rather than make more money, try to cut your overhead. Simplify your life. Maybe I don't need a fancy car. Maybe I can get by with a used car, or no car. I got rid of my van it's almost a year now that I've been. And it's been such a relief. I mean, I'm not saying that, many of you, most of you probably need a vehicle to do what you need to do. But, I'm 65 now. I don't have to work, a regular job. I just don't need a car, and the headache of, gas, what is gas now? $4 a gallon or something. It's like, I was always in anxiety about, is someone going to break into my van? I live downtown, and one time I had all my windows broken out in my van. Some gangbangers went nuts on my van. And, so I had to worry about, where am I going to park my van? I got to pay the insurance, gas prices, so I said, I'm just going to see if I can live without a vehicle. I mean, I'm fortunate. I'm downtown. The main bus station is there, and I have the trolley, so I have access. But that was my strategy. So, do I need to go get a job so I can keep my van, so that I can go to my job, so I can keep my van? It's just craziness, and that's much of what our modern society is. We're working for an artificial life that, if we simplify our lives, which is, Prabhupada coined that acronym, simple living, higher thinking. When your life is simplified, then you have more thinking space. Your brain, instead of being fatigued from running around trying to make money, you may have to live a little more modestly, but you'll have, your brain will be firing on all cylinders. It'll be full of deep introspection about God, about yourself, about human relationships with nature, with animals. It's like you open up an inner world, by minimizing by living simply. You open up more. Again, it's counterintuitive. You think, no, if I get more, I'll have more. No, the more you get, the less you have your inner life. That's real living. Real living is to have love in your heart, and that takes work. But if you're so taxed trying to maintain an artificial standard of living, you won't have the mental peace of mind and clarity and energy to do the real work of human life, which is to transform your heart.
There are a few self-sufficient art communities in India, and what I've heard about them is that most people, when they're moving there, they're nervous about giving up their cell phone. Because they don't have cell phones or like electricity. And then after they adjust to it, And certain people that have moved there that were like monks in like city temples or whatever said that, well, now as a married person living here, I have more time for my spiritual life than I did as a monk like living in the temple because I was always running around doing this and doing that. And you also don't need things like gyms because people are, you know, in the fields picking crops and whatnot.
Getting exercise from the work.
Yeah, exercise just from that.
And this whole industrial revolution that, you know, whatever it was in the 1800s, I mean, this is relatively new in human history that we have this mechanized society, you know, but because we're, you know, in our contemporary life, we're thinking, this is the world. No, it's not how most of people live for thousands and thousands of years. And, you know, there's propaganda in a sense that, you know, everybody lived this backward life and, you know, they all their teeth fell out because they didn't have dentists, and you know this. I mean, if you're living a healthy life, you know, you don't have all these ailments that we need all these modern conveyances to take care of all the disease. Like there's who was it? It was Shivananda, this devotee. It's a wonderful devotee. He lives in North Carolina right now. He's one of the original disciples of Prabhupada in the early days, and he was sent to Germany when he was a young man. But he was with Prabhupada one time, walking, and he had this question: where does disease come from? Is it in the body? Is it the mind? Is it karma? You know, where? And he couldn't articulate a question, but he was thinking it in his mind, and he was walking with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada just stopped and said, 90% of disease is caused by the mind. And then he just turned and kept walking, and Shivananda was like, wow, that was kind of mystical. But yeah, if our mind is disturbed, you know, there's that whole mind-body connection thing. If your mind is disturbed, then it's going to impact your physical health, and vice versa. You know, if you're not taking care of your physical health, it'll affect your mind. But living a sattvic life, a life in the mode of goodness, it puts the mind in a natural, peaceful state, and everything downstream runs better, you know, when we're in a when we're in that. And that's, you know, Prabhupada was very much concerned that, you know, because modern society is steeped in rajagun, passion, and ignorance, you know, so the sattva, the goodness, the mode of goodness, which is a springboard for spiritual consciousness, it's very conducive. So, yeah, he emphasized that quite heavily, you know, that we need to regulate our lives in such a way that we can remain as far as possible in the mode of goodness. And then we'll have the mental peace that's necessary. Hare Krishna, Shyam Gopal Prabhu, thanks for coming. That's necessary for thinking about God. If your mind is always disturbed by so many things, and it's difficult to chant with attention, you know, and intention, with heart, with feeling, you know. It's just like it just becomes like I got to get this over with, you know, so I can get on to my busy day. You know, it's like, no, this is the most important part of our life, is connecting with God through His holy name. So if there's that agitation, it'll be very difficult to, and we won't get that higher taste that comes, Param Drisvani Vartade, that, you know, when you're feeling that connection with God, that inner happiness, that enables you to refrain from indulging in unnecessary material, you know, activities. But without that higher taste, then it just becomes like, you know, you're just gritting your teeth, like, that looks pretty good over there. That looks pretty good over there. You know, it's like, it's a natural. So, you know, sometimes in the beginning, it's a little, not forced, but it's a little inconvenient. You know, like we're not accustomed to a sattvic life, you know, rising early, going to bed early, you know, early to bed, early to rise makes a bhakta blissful, healthy, and wise. That's kind of foundational, is going to bed early and getting up early, because the early morning hours are most advantageous for prayer and meditation and thoughtfulness. Govinda, all right.
Keep going.
Thanks for having me.
You did it, Prabhu. Thank you. Great.
Originally from